This will be for the con exercise, graph sinusoidal functions, phase shift. All right, they want us to graph this function here in the interactive widget. 1 point always defines an extremum, that's a minimum or a maximum, and the other point always defines a midline. All right, so there you go. So you need to be familiar with y equals sine of x and y equals negative sine of x. Those are right here in red and blue. And you also need to be familiar with the graphs of cosine of x and negative cosine of x. Again, both in red and blue. And I have a separate video on those 4 graphs. So the first step, since this is a cosine function, I am going to plot the basic cosine function, y equals cosine of x. All right, so the maximum is this green point here, and this is the midline right here. So the maximum of the cosine, it starts at 1, okay, and the midline is at the x-axis, and it goes down to -1. So the period is not correct yet, but we did the basic cosine function. All right. Now, this equation is in the form of A cosine of bx plus c plus d. All right. And the order I'm going to do this in, I'm going to do B first, that's based on the period. Then I'll do the A second, that's based on the amplitude. And let's see, then I will do the phase shift third, that's C. And the midline is for D. All right. And this equation is going to be in a different form when I plot, and I'll show you that later. All right. But these are the steps I'm going to do: B, A, C, D. All right. So let's do the period first. We know that the period is based on the number that's multiplied by x. So this is the value for B. All right. B is pi over 4. And the formula for the period, which you should know by now, that's going to be 2 pi over the absolute value of B. So that's 2 pi divided by pi over 4. Okay, keep, change, flip. Keep 2 pi, change division to multiplication, and flip pi over 4. And now it's 4 over pi. Pi over pi cancels, and 2 times 4 is just 8. So the period is 8. However, if you just go from a maximum to the midline, that distance, that horizontal distance, is only 1/4 of the period. Okay, so of course, if we take 1/4 of 8, that is just 2. So the horizontal distance between these 2 points should be 2. So I'm going to take this one, left click, drag it, and move it over to 2. All right, so now we got the period done. Next step, the value for A is 0.5. All right, so that is a vertical stretch or compression. I'm going to take each y value and multiply it by 0.5. Right here, the y value is 0. Does nothing to multiply by 0.5. 1 times 0.5 is, of course, 0.5. So I'll move this down to the 1/2 mark. All right. And now the period, the phase shift is a tiny bit tricky. We need to get this equation in the form of A times cosine of, cosine of B times x plus c plus d. All right, and the reason that is, in order to determine the phase shift, we have to see exactly what number is added or subtracted from x. We cannot see it when it's in this form, okay, because here the pi over 2 is added to pi over 4 times x. We need to have the x by itself. All right, so I'm going to factor this. Okay, so see, I want x by itself, so I'm going to factor out pi over 4. And that's times x. And since this has to be pi over 2, I'm thinking pi over 4 times what will give me pi over 2? Okay, pi over 4 times what will give me pi over 2? Well, if this number was a 2, then we would have 2 over 4, and these would cancel, and we would have pi over 2. So the missing number here is 2. All right, and it's positive, so it's going to be a positive 2. Now, if you want to test what I just did and see if this is equivalent to this, pi over 4 times x is right here. Pi over 4 times 2 is going to be pi over 2. That's right here. Okay, so this is equivalent to this. And now we can see we're adding 2 to the value of x. All right, when you add 2 to x, that actually makes it shift left by 2 units. Okay, you need to know how to shift functions left and right before you do this exercise. So I'm going to take both of my points and shift them left 2. All right, so this one's at y equals 1/2, 1, 2. Okay, it's still at y equals 1/2. This is at y equals 0, 1, 2. All right, and finally, the plus 3 moves everything up by 3. So this is at half. It's going to be at 3.5. Right there. This is at 0. It's going to be at 3. Right there. And that's it. Okay, even if you get it correct, you might want to click on how they answered the question, see if they did anything different. Okay, so the instructions are the same for all these problems. Here we have a sine function. Okay, so I'm going to start by graphing the basic sine function. All right, we actually have it already. Sine starts at the origin, and really it maxes out at 1. Okay, we don't have the period yet, but let's just get the sine function in order. The sine function starts at a midline and heads to the max. All right, let's do the period. The number that's times x is your value for b, and we know the period is 2 pi over the absolute value of b. So that's going to be 2 pi over 5. Keep, change, flip. Keep the numerator, change division to multiplication, and flip pi over 5. Pi over pi cancels. We're multiplying. 2 times 5 is 10. Now, once again, when you look at the graph, you are only going from midline to maximum here. Okay, this vertical distance is only going to be 1/4 of the period. So 1/4 of 10 is actually just 2.5. All right, so this horizontal distance needs to be 2.5. All right, it starts at 0. We'll keep the y coordinate at 1, and we'll move this over to 2.5. All right, period is done. Now on to the amplitude. All right, the vertical stretch, this function is multiplied by 3. So we're going to multiply all the points by 3. This is at y equals 0. 0 times 3 is 0. This is at 1 times 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's at 3. Notice I didn't move it left or right. It's still at the 2.5 for the x-axis. All right, now comes the tricky part. We want to factor out the pi over 5 and get x by itself. We want to isolate it. All right, so we're going to do pi over 5 times x. We got the plus sign. And pi over 5 times what will give us 2 pi over 5? Let's see. Pi over 5 times something will give us 2 pi over 5. All right, well, clearly, if we multiply by 2, pi over 2 will give us 2 pi, and we still have the 5. So the missing number here is positive 2. Now just double check. Pi over 5 times x, we got it. Pi over 5 times 2, we got it. 2 is going to be 2 pi over 5. So you can see here the x, the 2 is added to x. That makes it shift left by 2 units. Okay, remember shifting left and right, it's opposite. If this were a negative 2, it would shift right 2 units. All right, we're going to shift everything left 2 units. So let's see. All right, this is at the origin, shift it left 2 units. This is at 2.5, shift it to 1/2 or 0.5. All right, so that was the tough part. The easy part now, the midline minus 3. We're going to subtract 3 from every point. All right, so this is at y equals 0, subtract 3. So just go down 3. And this is at y equals 3, subtract 3. Just go down 3. Okay, hopefully that's correct. All right, there you go. All right, below is a graph of h of x. This is the maximum point, and this is the minimum point. Write the formula or equation for h of x. All right, so the points are given on the graph. Now, what I'm going to do here, I don't know if this is sine or cosine yet, but what I'm going to do is write the equation in this form first, okay? But they won't let you do that in the box. So after I get it in this form, we will distribute and then get it in the form that they want. Okay, the form that they want. They didn't, oh, there it is right here. That's the form that they want with the b multiplied by x inside the parentheses. So I'm going to do this form first and then distribute at the end, as you will see. So you see this graph here, we want to choose sine or cosine. I know the cosine function, basically, the cosine function basically goes like that, and the negative cosine function goes like that. Okay, so that's basically what we have here. So I'm going to start with negative cosine. All right, so in the box, I'm going to start with negative cosine, okay? And I'm going to do everything in the same order as last time. So now let's find the period. Okay, so this is a max and this is a min. So this distance right here, if we go down to the min, this horizontal distance right here is going to be half of the period, all right? Because we need to go all the way from here to here for the period, but we are only going halfway. So we're looking at the x coordinates. We have a negative pi over 2, and on the bottom down here, we have pi over 4. All right, so we are going from pi over 4 minus negative pi over 2. Okay, 2 negatives in a row make it positive. And this is really 2 pi over 4 plus 1 pi over 4. That's going to be 3 pi over 4. So that's the period. We know the formula for period equals 2 pi over b. All right, so we need to solve for b. Cross multiply 3 pi times b is going to equal 2 pi times 4. Solving for b, divide both sides by 3 pi. Cancels here. Pi's cancel. 2 times 4 is 8 divided by 3, so b equals 8/3. All right, so I'm going to record that answer. 8/3. So this is going to be 8/3 times x. All right, and now let's look for our amplitude. All right, we're looking at the y coordinates now. Amplitude, remember, that's only halfway there. So we're going halfway from 5 to -4. All right, so half of 5 minus -4. That's going to be half of 9, which is 9/2. All right, so the amplitude is 9/2. The value for A is 9/2. But this is a negative cosine, so it's actually -9/2. So hit the fraction button, 9/2. Now we need to do the phase shift. Okay. So the cosine function really has the minimum right here on the y-axis. So this is actually shifted over by pi/4 units. All right, it's shifted right by pi/4. Because if you use the negative cosine function, this point, the minimum should be right here on the y-axis. So it's shifted right pi/4. That means we need to subtract pi/4. All right. Now here comes the tricky part. We're subtracting pi/4. So this needs to be 8/3 parentheses x minus pi/4. All right. Now that's not the form we have it in because the 8/3 is inside the parentheses. So we simply need to distribute. 8/3 times x is 8/3 x. 8 times -pi is -8 pi. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, these are both divisible by 4. 8 divided by 4 and 12 divided by 4. Okay, so inside the parentheses, we have 8/3 x minus 2 pi/3. Okay, so inside 8/3 x minus 2 pi/3. All right, and finally, the easy part is for the midline. All right, the midline is, of course, right down the middle of this graph. Okay, so it's exactly between the min and max. So we're looking at the average of 5 and -4 divided by 2, and that's going to be 1/2. So the whole graph, the whole function added to the whole function is 1/2 on the end. All right, so on the very end, we have plus 1/2, or you can write 0.5. It'll take either one. All right, fingers crossed. Okay, let's see what I did wrong. All right, let's see. I recalculated the value for B. The period is actually 3 pi/2. If I said 3 pi/2 equal to the formula for the period 2 pi/b, I get B equals 4/3. So let me see. Hopefully that's the only problem here. I'll make it 4/3 x instead of 8/3. Fingers crossed. Okay, let's see. All right, the phase shift is negative pi/4. All right, so let me redo this. Negative pi/4. And that's going to give us 4/3 x. And this is 4/4 cancels pi/3 minus pi/3. Okay, I think that's it. So this is now going to be pi/3. Since I adjusted this, I had to adjust this. There we go. Okay, so this was incorrect, and as a result, this was also incorrect. So I fixed those. All right, last one. So here it says it's in this form, but it doesn't necessarily have to be sine. All right, so we have the midline and the maximum point. They're both on the graph. All right, so there you go. So let's see if we're going to use sine or cosine. Well, basically, the cosine function basically goes like that. Okay, and I can see that's what we have here. So since we have this right here and it starts right here, that's perfect for cosine. Okay, that's a positive cosine function. So I'm going to start with that. Cosine. All right, now let's do the period, and I'm going to do it correctly this time. So the period, we can do this part here and multiply by 4, but if we just go from here to here, that's the period. Okay, that's a full period, max to max. It starts at 0, and this point right here, the x-coordinate is pi. So the period is just pi. And the formula for the period equals 2 pi over b. All right, so multiply both sides by b. All right, times b. The b's cancel. And divide both sides by pi. And b is going to be 2. All right, so in the box here, parentheses, 2 times x. All right, now the phase shift. Let's see. Well, luckily, there is no phase shift. You see this here? It's on the y-axis. So we don't have to shift it left, right at all. That makes it easier. Okay, so I'm going to leave cosine of 2x. Now let's do amplitude, or the value for a. A goes halfway down. All right, again, this one is easy because they give us the coordinates. We're going from 7 to 3. So 7 minus 3 is just 4. So the value for a in the front, that's going to be 4. And finally, the value on the end is going to be for the midline. Okay, the midline is the equation for y equals this line right here. Very easy because they gave us the midline point. It's at y equals 3. So the whole graph is shifted up by 3. So that's just going to be a plus 3. All right, this one was much easier. All right, 3 out of 4, not bad.